transmissions detected.
Kill them all.
Hello my friends. Today I document some issues I have with historical events whose facts were given to us by the same woke class of people's grandkids we have today in power, the same clowns I can't stand. You see, in the last few hundred years something worldwide must have happened, and we can observe that. And the confusion or aftermath is when all these kingdoms were either brought back online or founded once again. It seems like, well, anyone not there to lay claim, or well, if their ancestors' land was, up for grabs, if they weren't around, you're just out of luck. There was no record of whose was what. There was no hard drives or anything storing information, no internet, no cell phones. And since hardly no one was around, well, the sky was the limit in some areas. Now think about this too, if you and your friends ruled the world. Seriously, just you and 5 or 6 others. And that's what happened according to the peasants. Nobodies showed up. Before this, they were nothing. You got Great Britain, France, Germany, Russia, America, all the superpower buddies, right? After these events, whatever happened, people just went in and laid claim to various lands. You and your families move into the castles and the mansions that are abandoned, right? Nobody's around to oppose you. And if they were, you could only imagine what you could probably get away with too. These people assumed the role of leader of the land, and whether they stole their money or not, they had it. And what was the golden rule, especially back then? He who has the gold, well, he made the rules. You immediately hire you a security force of the surrounding natives. It grows exponentially because, well, everyone's poor and has nothing except you. And then you get everyone that you know around you who needs money to join in. It's that simple. You and your security force, and along with your friends and their power and influence, and they back you up. So what can anyone do? They can't remove you. The historical claims are very easy to manipulate. Anyone can say they have a deed to land before technology came around, and there's no hall of records anymore that we know of to fact check any of it. What we read today is what we go by, despite the inconsistencies and outright impossibility of everything. It's probably all forged nonsense, Here's an example of the many completely odd and telling explanations of how a country was taken over, in your face. According to Middle Eastern historians, this is the rundown of what they did in Egypt in 1802, just a couple hundred years ago. Egypt, the early years. They say nowhere was there greater opportunity for a total restructuring of society than in Egypt. See, first sentence. The 3-year French occupation from 1798 to 1801 had disrupted the country's traditional political and economic structures. Continuing the task begun by the French, Muhammad Ali. Now we'll stop right there. With that name, you would totally think this man was of Arabian descent, Syrian, surely at least Egyptian. Absolutely not. He was a Greek white dude from the Ottoman Empire and not from around here. It's ridiculous. Now this white dude, Muhammad Ali, I just can't believe it. He officially put an end to Egypt's traditional society. Now I wonder why he would do that. Well, probably because he was not from that area. Now he eliminated the Mamluks, the former ruling oligarchy, taking the old landholding class's money and real estate, and killed or exiled the ones who basically wouldn't comply. Now I looked this up, the Egyptian Mamluks. They were enslaved Christians, all right? They were there before the Muslims showed up. They were deployed for fighting in wars on behalf of several Islamic kingdoms. They called them slave soldiers. They basically ruled Egypt for, 800 years? Yeah, imagine the things you find out. This Ali turned the religious class into pensioners of the government, restricted the activities of the native merchant and artisan groups. He neutralized the Bedouins and crushed all movements of rebellion among the peasants. A true tyrant, isn't he? Now, his policies, they say, were designed more to entrench himself and his family in Egypt as its hereditary rulers than to create a new society. So he didn't want to do anything nice for them, just for himself. It says he wanted to strengthen his position within Egypt to increase his revenues. He instituted sweeping changes. By 1815, most of Egypt's agricultural land had been converted into state land. Profits from agriculture became available to the ruler, and he recognized the administrative structure of the government, had to be made to ensure strict control of the economy. And he did that. He attempted to construct a modern industrial system to process Egypt's raw materials. And get this, it ended before it started because of lack of power, workers, infrastructure like roads, people with educations. For some reason, it says here, he disbanded his mercenary army and created an army of the Egyptians from the peasant class, like was there in the first place. It just seemed to be a great idea. I don't have to pay him or anything. It was a joke. No one was willing to do anything military-oriented, okay? Not in the 1800s. They didn't get hardly any supplies. Now, just the soldiers that they showed off on special occasions, they were the ones that were even half competent, who had uniforms or even weapons. Other than that, most of his ragtag army was so impoverished that they sold the things that they were finding in the desert, and that's to anyone who had $1. They were either all just desperate or a product of their environment. Unwittingly, they became the actual first grave robbers of the ancient tombs, and, well, they're who tipped off the elite to the goodies laying underground. You see what I mean? In the 1800s, Egypt lacked sources of power, a native managerial class and a trained working class. Get this, they say even the agricultural sector declined ultimately because of administrative mismanagement, excessive taxation, military conscription of the peasantry, and monopolization of trade. Well, that sounds like some countries today, doesn't it? By the mid-1830s, Muhammad Ali's policy of turning Egypt into a massive plantation for his own benefit had reached a point of diminishing returns. You see how they did this? In July of 1840, Great Britain, Russia, Austria, and Prussia agreed to end their rule in Egypt and Syria. In 1841, he and his family were granted the hereditary right to rule Egypt and Sudan, even though they had just showed up one day in 1802. And that's why we have such backward stories, y'all, that make no sense. They made it all up and put their friends in power and boldly state the facts now as if it was no big deal. This is how we took all these people out of power and killed all the Christians and stuck Woo! If you get a moment, go read about the Dome of the Rock and see how it was made exactly like the Christian churches, the dome being almost exactly to the inch of like all the others in the world we see. We have official timeline of events suggesting that basically before the year 700, there was no such place, no such nothing. Weird, isn't it? But that's another video. Just go check that out, though. Now, in this area here, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Afghanistan, this is where King Og's land was said to have been and home of the native Rephaim. Nobody went anywhere near this area, anywhere in the Middle East, for one reason, according to the old stories. They say because you were food to the double row of teeth, six-finger and toed giants. We sometimes forget that these places are famous. Iran is Persia, don't forget that. Palestine is Canaan. Iraq is Mesopotamia. Afghanistan, Kandahar or Kush, the land of giants. But, I don't know, it gets lost or something, along the way. For hundreds of years, the archaeologists and explorers roamed the deserts of Egypt and the plains of America and did whatever they wanted. The first government body in Egypt in charge of history was the Department of Antiquities. It wasn't established until 1858, though. But it wasn't run by Egyptians. It was run by either French or German professors until 1892. See, there's your Germans again. Before World War II, they're everywhere. Now, this in 1858, when they established this, and in 1892 it became official, well, get this. It did not become the famous Egyptian Antiquities organization that me and you know of until 1970s. Yeah, but for a very long time, there was no official in charge, no one to question or limit what anyone did. In fact, for a very long time, it appears no permits or permissions were needed to dig up any tomb, grave, or ancient site they so wished, anywhere. Like in America before the Smithsonian. Nobody cared what you did. No one knew what was in the ground. It was all here before them. So, not until they found out anything was worth something did anyone even think about stopping anyone. And I think it was run like this. Whoever the highest bidder is, come dig. Until it became popular with the public, of course. That seems to be right after World War I, about 1922, when they found King Tut's tomb. That's when Hollywood made all this popular. I mean, look at these people just having a picnic on top of the pyramids. And think about this. Today, you'll go to prison for that. Funny how things change, isn't it? Now, I believe most of the public didn't realize that, there's no Egyptian government agency or antiquities department in which to regulate or document the finds. It was whatever the tomb raiders said it was. And what could go wrong with that, right? The big colleges and elite museums even paid the natives and locals to help them. They showed us Indiana Jones. The people who lived around there, they didn't care. None of their ancestors were buried where they were digging, obviously. And like I said, whoever's got the gold can do whatever they want. You show up with some money, we'll dig anybody out of the ground. Egypt and all other Middle Eastern, lands basically were third world countries, and they were wastelands until the mid-20th century. Most of what we see now has been stood back up, repaired, dug out of the sand, all in the last couple hundred years. Now, did you catch the picture of the Sphinx? Those pictures? And how it used to look? Yeah, it doesn't look like it's supposed to. It's got the huge plaque in between its feet, still buried in 1850. And I wonder what it said, too. Now, how is it? Famous and holy places are not recognized as countries until after the 1940s. I don't know if, it's just me or not, but they're sitting there wasting away. I mean, if it was a famous land, why was everything in ruins and no one around? I feel like they should have been the most populated and richest countries for so many reasons. In Afghanistan, I was like, okay, there's an old country. We get oil there, right? Oh, well, that's pretty weird. Afghanistan, being the first country to be formed in the Middle East, was not until 1926. And I checked in, there's no standing armies in 1800s anywhere in the area. They say a few tribes on camels and horses. The French and Germans and British and Americans and everyone in the wars plundered these places. And with the hundreds of other little scuffles, well, no one stood a chance. See, they didn't have no hospitals, no shops, no nothing. Unless, of course, you were in Cairo or some other elite hangout city where the controllers first set up shop. Yeah, then you might see, a little bit of modern day. In the books the archaeologists and explorers wrote, they tell us what could still be found in the Middle East during these 1800s. And it's not, only what we know about the pyramids and other famous places. Those are there, mostly still buried. But the giant houses, the castles, the vast cities, huge buildings that were just sitting there deserted as if the people just one day vanished. Here's one record from the book Giant Cities of Bashan, documented in 1875 by explorer, Professor and Reverend J.L. Porter. Another peculiarity of Bashan I cannot refrain from communicating to my readers. The ancient cities and even villages of western Palestine have been almost annihilated, with the exception of Jerusalem, Hebron, and two or three others. Not one stone has been left upon another. In some cases we can scarcely discover the exact spot where a noted city stood, so complete has been the desolation. Even in Jerusalem itself, only a very few vestiges of the ancient buildings remain. The Tower of David, portions of the wall of the temple area, and one or two other fragments, just enough to form the subject of dispute among antiquaries. Zion is plowed like a field, and I've seen the plow at work on it. And with the hand that writes these lines, I have plucked ears of corn from the fields of Zion. I have pitched my tent on the site of ancient Tyre, and searched in vain for a single trace of its ruins. Then, and not till then, did I realize the full force and truth of the prophetic denunciation upon it. Thou shalt be sought for, yet shalt thou never be found again. And the very ruins of Capernaum, that city which in our Lord's day was exalted unto heaven, have been so completely obliterated that the question of its site never has been and probably never will be definitely settled. And these are not solitary cases. Jericho has disappeared. Bethel is come to naught. Samaria is a heap in a field of the field, as plantings of a vineyard. The state of Bashan is totally different. It is literally crowded with towns and large villages, and though the vast majority of them are deserted, they are not ruined. I have more than once entered a deserted city in the evening, taken possession of a comfortable house, and spent the night in peace. Many of the houses in the ancient cities of Bashan are perfect, as if only finished yesterday. The walls are sound, the roofs unbroken, the doors, even window shutters, in their places. Let not my readers think that I am transcribing a passage from the Arabian Nights. I'm relating sober facts. I'm simply telling what I have seen and what I purposed just now more fully to describe. But how, you ask me, can we account for the preservation of ordinary dwellings in a land of ruins? If one of our modern English cities were deserted for a millennium, there would scarcely be a fragment of a wall standing. And the reply is easy enough. The houses of Bashan are not ordinary houses. Their walls are from 5 to 8 feet thick, built of large squared blocks of basalt. The roofs are formed of slabs of the same material, hewn like planks, reaching from wall to wall. The very doors and window shutters are of stone, hung upon pivots projecting above and below. Some of these ancient cities have from 200 to 500 houses, still perfect, but not a man to dwell in them. On one occasion, from the battlements of the castle of Salka, I counted some 30 towns and villages, dotting the surface of the vast plain, many of them almost as perfect as when they were built. And yet, for more than 5 centuries, there has not been a single inhabitant in one of them. Yeah, that's crazy, right? Over the last 150 years or so, these various agencies worldwide took things upon themselves when no one was paying attention. Organizations like the Smithsonian, the UNESCO, and World Heritage Groups. Many others, they were all put into place to help the controllers keep the shenanigans going. And those jobs are the meaningless ones, the unnecessary ones. See, when our history started to be questioned after technology brought information, well, they couldn't have that. The internet started to become popular. Wheels started spinning. In 1989, America passed the Museum of American Indian Act. This law ordered the Smithsonian to return all bones and skeletons of natives to their respective tribes. Miraculously, in 2023, when the Book of Enoch, Giants, and Tartaria was in full swing on social platforms, the Smithsonian, out of the blues, reported, we now have returned over 5,000 ancient skeletons back to their tribes. And that's how they conveniently got rid of all the giants that we read about in American newspapers and journals, in the 17 and 1800s. I believe that law was slipped in to fix the historical issues with being in possession of these giant bones and not have to answer for it. They panicked and finished up. Sorry, gave it all back to the Indians, See, we already knew that the cowboy cathedrals had to be the giant buildings that someone merely found abandoned, but no one who matters cares to investigate, in fear of job loss, The very thought of giant humans, makes some scientists and professors cringe and lose their minds. We're getting smaller and weaker, and it's opposite. They can't explain it. In their model, this is not supposed to happen. Any acknowledgement of the claim of giant humans would upend the current perception of reality that they've pushed for so long, and it would expose their lies. And what does this all mean? I have no idea. I just can't get over that what we allow to take place every single day. It's amazing. It never stops. But then I'm told, when I do a little research, for 1,000 years, not one greedy person cared about any ancient city, no king, treasure, or anything that laid under the sand at their feet. I doubt that. Or when I find out a Greek white man took over Egypt and I'm supposed to not think something's weird here. When you got rid of all the Christians and stuck the Muslims in there, okay, nothing to see here, all right. The fact that the elite claim rights to the giants' abandoned buildings, and we have a record of it, makes me sick, but what can you do, right? And as of last year, I think the really funny one is the Smithsonian conveniently giving back all the Native American Indian bones and relics that we were asking about. you know. And truly, look, they can say now, nothing to see here, you know. But if you really want to be technical, I guess I'll just tell you this. If you really want to be technical, history is, on its face, all just hearsay, honestly. I mean, isn't it? Oh, man. Well, I just figured I'd share that thought with you. And it's what I needed to say. My love to you all. I'm Wild Dog, and I am out of here.
Like the seems to fade away.